Hello students, I'm Sam sir, and today we are going to learn chapter number 4 of geography. The chapter's name is Major Landforms. So let's start with the definition of landform. A landform is a feature on the Earth's surface that is part of the terrain. So mountains, hills, plateaus, and plains are four major types of landforms. Now, in the previous chapter of geography, that was about there we read about the earthquakes and the volcanoes. The chapter's name was Our Changing Earth. So there we knew that there are two types of forces acting on the earth all the time. One is endogenic forces, and the other one is exogenic. So endogenic is anything that is happening below the surface of earth in the lithosphere. They may originate even deeper, but exogenic forces are the ones which are acting on the surface, and their results are also seen on the surface. So such forces are known as exogenic forces, and this chapter is about exogenic forces. So these exogenic forces, they create structures on the surface of earth, and these structures are known as landforms. Now, there are some minor landforms. They are like buttes, canyons, valleys, and basins, and there are some larger major landforms. We have such landforms on earth such as the mountains, and Mount Everest and Mount Kanchenjunga. They are examples of that. Here are four of the minor ones: buttes, canyons, valleys, and river basins. Although when you look out of your window, you don't feel that there's nothing. You feel as if there's nothing much happening there except for the birds and the wind blowing and the trees moving with the wind. But actually, there are a lot of things happening below the surface of the earth and on the surface of the earth also. You know that there are some 1 million earthquakes happening all over the earth in 1 year. That will amount to several hundred every day. But we do not feel them because most of them are not dangerous and we hardly come to know. So the earth's surface is always changing, it's changing continuously. And that nature is known as dynamic nature. Means dynamic is nothing is stable there, everything is changing continuously. Volcanic eruptions and earthquakes take place in the lithosphere and change the features on the surface of Earth. These changes are rapid changes. A volcanic eruption happens in a matter of minutes, and earthquakes happen in a matter of seconds. Just a few seconds of shaking, and everything is over. But when it comes to the exogenic forces that are weathering and erosion, they take a lot of time. You know, some of them are so slow; it takes thousands of years to be noticed. Weathering and erosion also keep occurring. They to change the features on the surface of Earth. They bring changes slowly. This is the difference between endogenic and exogenic. Endogenic is happening very fast. Exogenic is happening over thousands of years. Now, these terms you have been studying since class 7, maybe class 6 also, weathering and erosion. So, let's have a look at them both. Weathering means the breaking up of rocks on the Earth's surface. Now, these rocks, they're exposed to elements such as the heat of the sun, the coldness that happens in winter, the frost that is ice formation. So, if you have heat, it expands the rocks, cold will contract the rocks, and this expansion and contraction will make the rock weaker, and eventually it will break into fragments. There are also chemical reactions. Although these chemical reactions are not major and fast reactions, they are slow and they are weak reactions. For example, there is carbon dioxide in atmosphere, and when it rains, this CO2 dissolves in rainwater and forms carbonic acid, which is a weak acid, and this acid over a period of time, this will make the surface of rocks brittle, that is easy to break, and then the surface of the rocks disintegrate. Also, plants and animals, they have a role in the contribution of weathering. Plants grow roots, and roots increase in girth, and animals have the habit of burrowing. So all these help in weathering. Now, erosion means a little bit different. It means the weathering away of the landforms by agents like water, wind, and moving ice. So this chapter is mainly about erosion, and we are going to see about erosion because of running water, that is in rivers and streams, wind, as you know very well, and moving ice is known as glacier. Now, what are the factors which affect the erosion and deposition? Now, you should understand one thing. There are three things which are always happening one after the another. The first one is erosion. The second one is transportation, and the third one is deposition. Erosion is removal of the surface soil or the surface of rocks, and transportation is either by water or air, that is wind, or by ice. That eroded material is taken away from there and it is transported, it is moved, that is transportation. And later these agents of erosion, they lose their power, they lose the strength in them or the force in them, and then these materials which they had eroded, they deposit them somewhere else. So that is deposition. The slope of riverbeds in hilly areas, the slope is very steep, and the water carries a small volume of the river or the streams or in the mountains. They do not carry a large volume of water. It's only a small volume of water. But the thing is, this small volume of water flows very swiftly. Now, this swift flow has got lot of power for erosion, and this forms a number of landforms and V-shaped valley. Now, always remember, see, when you write capital W, W for water, you make 2 points, isn't it? So here you have to remember it like that for your examination. Capital V has got 1 point, and W has got 2 points. So depending on these points, you remember that V-shaped valley is formed. This is the most common landform found by rivers. Now, plants, they prevent erosion. What plants do is they slow down erosion because of their roots. Their roots tightly bind the rock and soil particles, and this prevents the rock and soil particles from slipping away in flowing water or in blowing wind. Plants also act like a natural barrier to flowing water and wind. They cut down the force of flowing water and wind, and this slows down the process of erosion. Now, in your science textbook, you will have a chapter about forests. What are the roles of forests? What are the advantages of forests? And uh, in previous year, when you were in sixth standard, you had a chapter about natural disasters, natural calamities. And there also we said that if plants are present, they reduce these natural disasters. Here is the mechanism of that. So, cutting of forests, if the forests are cut, this is one of the main reasons why erosion has increased over the period. Now, this picture shows the effect of weather on rocks, and this effect of weather on rocks is known as weathering. This picture shows erosion. In this case, it was the seawater which has eroded the land here, and it eroded it just below the road. So that is why you find this kind of dangerous situation for drivers. Suddenly they turn a corner and find there is no road there. Now, running water is perhaps the most powerful agent of erosion because it has a lot of force due to the mass of flowing. Mass means it's like weight. Mass means the amount of material present. Now, amount of material present in water is, if in 1 liter water there is 1 kilogram of water present. So, and there's a relationship in physics that force is equal to mass multiplied by acceleration. So, if there is speed, if the water is flowing with speed and lot of mass is moving, and this is having lot of power, and this power is the one which is causing this erosion. When rain falls, water flows in small streams, joining and forming larger streams. Some rainwater evaporates and the rest seeps underground. Now, there are some terms which we use when we are talking about rivers and water bodies, and rivers and streams especially. So, whenever we want to say the origin of a river, we say the source of the river. And wherever the river meets another water body like an ocean, we call that area, that place where it meets the other water body, as the mouth. And river basin is an area drained by the river, and there are other rivers joining. If there are other smaller river joining this larger river, those rivers are known as tributaries, and together these rivers, both the main river and its tributaries, that will make the ground wet on which it's flowing. Now, this wet ground is known as the area drained by the river and its tributaries. In short, we call it as river basin. Now, in this picture, you can see the V-shaped valley. Water is a liquid, and because of it being a liquid, it has its own way of flowing. And when it flows, it does some erosion and forms this kind of V-shaped valleys. Now, there are three works of the river. This you should know. Running water erodes the rock over which it flows. Like I told you, for every erosion, in every activity which is changing the landform, there are three things. One is erosion, second is transportation, and third is deposition. In these three sentences also, you can find in the first sentence is erosion, in the second sentence is deposition. Eroded materials transportation, that is, eroded materials transported by running water. Transported means carried to some distance, and this transported material is also deposited by flowing water. The river is very fast at its origin in the mountains or in the hilly areas, and as it flows through the plains, and when it reaches the destination at the mouth of the river has slowed down, it has become wider, and because of the slow speed, whatever material it is carrying, it will start depositing that, because it doesn't have that much power anymore to carry that material, and in any case it has carried lot of material over the length of the river, so this material gets deposited. Now, the function of a river varies with the volume of water it carries. Then it forms different types of valleys. You already saw what is an V-shaped valley. Now here is one more type. This is known as a gorge. It is also known as I-shaped valley. The gorge is very deep and narrow valley. Just notice the sides of the valley; they are vertical, they are straight. And these such valleys are formed when river flows over hard rocks. Here is another example. Again, you notice the steep sides of the rocks on both the sides. Now, a waterfall is formed when the water of the river falls almost vertically down a steep valley side, and if there is a sudden break in the landform due to faulting. Now, this faulting, this term you have seen in your previous chapter. Now, if there is a sudden break in the landform due to faulting, it results in formation of waterfalls. There is a waterfall known as Jog Falls in Karnataka. It's on a river known as Sharavati, and this waterfall is very famous for its natural beauty. People go and visit, they want to see this waterfall. Now, there's another term known as rapids. Rapids, when the name itself indicates that there is a swiftly flowing river, there's a fast flowing river, and rapid is a term given to steep sloping segment of swift flowing river, And when the river enters a plain, the flow is no longer swift, and then it forms meanders are like, they are s-shaped curves, and meanders form due to continuous erosion. The floor of the river valley becomes wider. Now I've given the meaning of meander. It means formation of loops and roundish bends, just like you write capital S. Now this is a photograph of rapids. People go there for adventure sports. Here they are doing rafting. Now, meandering also gives rise to certain landforms, and one of that is the Oxbow Lake. The meandering loop becomes almost circular due to continuous erosion and deposition. So, every time the river is turning, whenever it's bending, it's depositing. If let us say that a river is going straight and it's bending towards the right hand side, so on the left hand bank of the river, there will be some deposition. Then it goes some distance and turns left. So on the right hand side bank, there will be some deposition, and it will keep on go happening like that. The loops come very close to each other sometimes, and uh, then the gap gets filled with the deposited material, and it isolates a oxbow shaped lake, and that is known as an oxbow lake. I have photos also show you. This is the meaning of meander. It's like a snake, and the river is looking like a snake, and this typically happens in the plain areas. Here you can see the meandering river, and on the left hand side, this portion, you see that there's an isolated portion of water U-shaped. This is an oxbow lake. Somewhere the deposition at the mouth of Oxbow Lake would have happened, and the river then took another course. Now let's see what is a floodplain. Most of the floods occur in rainy season. When the water spills over the banks, you're aware of the floods which happened in Bihar recently. There's a river called Kosi which flows through Bihar, and that river is known as the sorrow of Bihar because every year it floods. When the water recedes, it leaves behind alluvial deposits over a large area on both the sides of the river. This alluvium forms a relatively flat region. This region is known as a floodplain. Alluvium, I think you already know, the mud which is carried, mud and broken rock pieces which is carried by flowing water. When it gets deposited, that deposit is called alluvium. Now, the formation of the floodplain, it happens in abundant quantity near river channels. The deposit pile up on the banks and form raised embankments. Then these raised embankments, these are the banks of the river. These are also known as natural levees. So look at this picture now. The flat area to which arrows are pointing are the floodplains. And the very borders of the river, the edges of the river, also has got some deposition, some little bit higher deposition. This higher deposition, which forms the banks of the river or the borders of the river, are known as natural levees. Excuse my throat. The river ends at the river mouth. On reaching its mouth, it carries large volume of alluvium and water. The excess load is deposited as sandbars. So here's another definition for you. Sandbar. I have got some photographs to show you. The main channel gets divided into several channels. You see, these are known as distributaries. Tributaries are the ones are the rivers which join the main river, and distributaries are just opposite. They branch out from the main river. This is the difference. And together, sandbars and distributaries together they form a distinctive feature at the mouth of the river. This is known as delta. Now delta is a Greek alphabet, and delta is also written for triangle. So can you see this yellow triangle? This is the delta of a river. On one side, the blue thing, light blue on the right hand side is the ocean, and the dark blue line is the river. At the point at which uh, this is dividing into distributaries, that point is known as the mouth of the river, and these thinner blue lines are the distributaries, and these green finger like projections are known as sandbars. Now here is an actual photograph of a sandbar. This is what it will look like. Looks very beautiful. The delta is a Greek alphabet and it is written, you just form a triangle, just like you form a triangle when you want to write a triangle in geometry. And this triangle denotes the triangular shape of the landform. A delta is a depositional landform and is formed by a network of distributaries. Now, remember, all these things can be asked to you as MCQ or objective type questions. These distributors deposit sediments that they have brought. And Ganga Brahmaputra Delta is very famous, and these rivers are also famous and they form the biggest delta in the world. That delta is known as Sundarbans, as you already know. Indian rivers flowing into Bay of Bengal form deltas, but the rivers which are flowing into the Arabian Sea on the other side, they do not form deltas. Do you know why? Because the Indian subcontinent is little bit tilted towards Bay of Bengal, and that makes these rivers longer. And because they are longer, they contain lot of sediments because their length is more, and the slope is gentle. And when they reach the Bay of Bengal, they start depositing this sediments which they have brought, and that forms a delta. Now we look at the work of sea waves. Till now we have seen the work of rivers. Rivers are freshwater bodies, they don't have salt in them as much as the seas have. The sea is a constantly eroding, and it's all constantly eroding the old landforms in the coastal areas. And it also creates new landforms continuously. Seawater, because of the sea waves, perform the work of erosion and deposition. Here, both the work, erosion and deposition, is done by the sea waves. Even transportation is done by the sea waves itself. Currents, tides, and storms also do this work at different rates. Currents are like uh, underwater rivers. They are flowing water. Although they are sea water, they have different temperature and different densities because of which they flow. Tides are caused due to the gravitational pull of the moon, and storms, you know very well, water cyclones and storms. You studied that in in your other chapters, and this year also in science you will study about that. Even hard rocks are broken down and carried away because of the continuous and ceaseless action of waves. The rock material is present in seawater, and it causes erosion of landforms against which it crashes. So the water doesn't contain water and salt only; it contains rock material also, which it has eroded from somewhere else, and that makes the seawater quite heavy and with lot of power. And the erosion which is caused by these sea waves is known as marine erosion and deposition. So here's a picture of a sea wave crashing on rocks on the shore. It crashes with quite a lot of violence and with a lot of force. Look at this interesting rock structure which is formed in the middle of the sea because of erosion. Now we talk about another landform which is known as sea cliff. They are formed when waves crash at the base of high rocky coasts. The rocks get eroded, and with passage of time, some rocks collapse into the sea, and that leaves a steep wall of rock facing the sea. This steep wall of rock is known as sea cliff. There are two terms again associated with sea cliff because after some time, these sea cliffs will form arches and stacks. So sea arch is a passage created when a headland is projecting into sea gets eroded. and sea stack remains when the sea arches further eroded. Now, in this picture, you can see all these three things. This white mountain like thing is the sea cliff. Look at the vertical side and look at just also notice the layer like rock. This is an example of a sedimentary rock because layer upon layer of sediment has been deposited here. So, this is a sea cliff. Now, let's see what is a sea arch. This bow like thing, like arch like thing, because some portion of the sea cliff got eroded away. This is known as the sea arch. Now, over a period of time, what will happen is more erosion will occur to this sea arch, and its top portion will become very weak so that it cannot support the weight of the material above it, and it will break and drown in the sea, and it will leave something like this. The third picture, the third part, and this is known as a sea stack. So now you know what is a sea cliff, sea arch, and a sea stack. This is another picture of the sandbar going into the sea. Good place for people to enjoy their holidays. Now, the beach is also a landform created by seawater because sediments like sand and pebbles get deposited along the sea coast, and this forms a beach. India has got many beautiful beaches. We have beaches. Uh, some of them are quite famous. Goa is a state with beautiful beaches. You also have Karnataka. There are some beautiful beaches in Maharashtra. Then you have Kerala. You have Tamil Nadu. In Tamil Nadu, you have the Marina Beach, which is quite famous. Sometimes sea water gets trapped between sandbars and coast, and this forms something known as a lagoon. Lagoon is a partially enclosed lake and it contains seawater. There is one lake in India known as Chilika Lake, which is in Odisha, which is the largest lagoon lake in India. So, if you ask a question, what kind of water will Chilika Lake have? Sweet water or salty water? Your answer should be salty because it's a lagoon. It's although we call it by the name of a lake. This is a photograph of a beach. This is the lagoon. Look how the seawater has entered into the land. This is a map picture of the Chilika Lake. You can see that there are sandbars here, these long lines, thin lines, and they are more or less permanent in nature. So there are villages located. This Titipa, this Satapada, the Sapada, etc. These are villages which are located actually on the sandbar. Now we look at the third thing, that is the work of moving ice. Now, water is a liquid and ice is a solid. So, when ice will flow, it actually does not flow, it just creeps. So, the creeping of ice will form a different type of landform. And how it happens? There is no fall in high latitudes uh, and at great heights there are areas covered with snow. These areas are known as snowfields, and they all lie above the snow line. So a river like a flow starts, of snow and ice, and it moves very slowly. It moves just a few meters per day. Some can move even less than that. And this river of snow and ice is known as glacier. Glacier does the work of erosion and transportation. All the three things, erosion, transportation, and deposition, are done by glaciers also. A glacier can change or completely remove existing landforms. It can also create new landforms or different landforms. Now, remember, here we are talking about ice, we are not talking about water. So, the distribution of density and mass is different in solid, isn't it? So, when this ice is moving, the floor of the valley becomes flat and the sides become steep. And uh, It also does erosion, but it does it in a different way than in a water. When water flows, it forms a V-shaped valley. When a glacier flows, it forms a U-shaped valley. Have a look. This is a picture of a U-shaped valley. Look at the uh, slope between these mountains. It's definitely U-shaped. The glacier itself forms different landforms. It cuts out hollows along the slope of a mountain, and this depression looks like an armchair. In the cross section, it looks like an armchair, and that this is known as a cirque. And when ice melts, this depression will naturally get filled with water, and it will form a lake, and that lake is known as a tarn. When the glaciers melt, their capacity to carry load reduces. So what they do is they start depositing the load which they are carrying, and these deposits form what is known as glacial moraines. So look at this, the white arrow on the bottom. This is what we meant when we said that it forms an armchair shaped hollow depression. That is known as a cirque. And when lake forms in this depression, that lake is known as tarn. In real life, this curvature is known as cirque, and the water it will hold is known as tarn. This water is a lake. Look, this is a glacier. It's a river of moving ice, and it deposits material to the sides. When it's depositing material to the side, it is known as lateral moraine. Not every glacier will do it, but some glacier deposit material in the center also. This is known as a median moraine. And at the end of the glacier also, that is means where uh, the glacier has got its um, front portion, that will have moraine known as terminal moraine. Now we look at the work of wind. The action of wind is prominently seen in deserts. The reason is the wind has a greater speed here because the wind doesn't have much obstructions, things to obstruct its path. So the speed is more. Also, the temperature difference in deserts is more. So that also creates quite a lot of difference in air pressure, and that increases the speed. Sand particles are loosely attached, and this is of course also due to the absence of vegetation, and this makes the particles fly in the wind very easily. Like water and ice, wind also erodes rocks, transports and deposits the eroded material. The desert wind erodes the lower part of the rocks more than the upper part. This gives the rocks a mushroom shape. These rocks are called mushroom rock. Here's a picture of the mushroom rocks. Can you guess why the wind do more activity at the base and not at the top of the rock? If you don't know the answer, let me tell you. Because of the temperature difference. The temperature, if the temperature of the wind is higher, the density will be lower and the wind will be flowing at a greater height. And if the temperature is low, if the wind is cold, it will be blowing near the surface and its velocity will be more. That is the reason of the formation of this mushroom rock. Look, I have a picture of a mushroom also. Then you compare this mushroom with this mushroom rock. They look similar. Let's talk about sand dunes. You live in Rajasthan and you know what are sand dunes. Coarse sand particles get deposited in the form of hillocks. These hillocks are known as sand dunes. They develop when there is some obstruction in the path of the wind. Let us say there's a bush or there's a tree in the path of the wind, and some sand starts depositing there. It forms a small hillock, and the hillock keeps growing bigger and bigger. The leeward slope is steep, and the windward slope is gentle. Windward means the slope which is receiving the wind and the leeward slope is the slope behind the windward slope. They form mostly in groups, and they vary in height. They may be just a few meters tall, or they may be as tall as 300 meters. Here's a picture of sand dunes, and here's a diagram of sand dunes explaining the wind direction and the uh, formation, the structure itself. There are different terms for different shaped dunes which you will be learning in higher classes. This one is known as a Barchan dune. Sometimes dust particles which are very fine and sand particles, they get carried by wind to a large distance, long distance, and deposited somewhere else. Over a period of time, layer upon layer of such fine dust gets collected, and this makes the layer thicker as more and more gets deposited. Such deposits are known as loess. This is one of the landforms again in this chapter. So sand dunes and loess are features formed due to work of wind. If you're asked in fill in the blanks, dash and dash are features formed due to work of wind. You have to write sand dunes and loess. Now there's a road constructed here, and this construction would have required digging. So if you look at this loess, you can see the layer like structure. There's a road here in the foreground and loess in the background. You can see the deposition layer upon layer. And I'm sure you can find such a deposition here in Sujangarh also. When you take a right turn from the school onto the highway, and when you go towards the railway gate, on the left hand side you will find loess. This is the end of chapter. When loess is not cut, as in construction of a road, it looks quite beautiful. Look at this. All right, this is the end of the chapter. Um, uh, Go through the notes also and the question answers which I given you, and give this video a thumbs up. And from now onwards, we'll be discussing the questions and answers for S7. Bye till then.